course, no one's feed showing. Okay, guys, gonna be just a minute here as we are experiencing some technical difficulties.
We are here in spirit. We are the disembodied voice you hear at night from under your bed.
See if we can't get everybody's video feed up here. For some reason, we're not getting any video feed tonight. Everybody can see exactly what it takes to actually get our show up and running.
Well, can they hear us?
They can hear us. So if you guys want to just provide a little bit of entertainment for a second here, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. Now to the man on the street. Fat kid, what's make fat kid so fat? There we go. Little monster squad.
Yeah.
Were you that little fat kid? No, I just beat the shit out of me. Why are you so fat?
The great Bobcat Goldthwait.
Oh, yeah.
They just posted a picture. I forget what it was on, but it was like the 35th anniversary of Police Academy or some stuff like that. And it was Bobcat Goldthwait and Tim Kazurinsky together. Oh, what a great picture. I mean, it was just great, like, just seeing the two of them next to each other again.
Yeah, that is one of my absolute favorite parts of any Savage Steve Holland film is in One Crazy Summer. It's like, let me tell you a story about a little fat kid who used to get beat up every day after school. He goes to the whole diatribe, and then John Cusack listens. He goes, "Were you that little fat kid?" He's like, "No, I used to beat the shit out of him. Why are you so fat? Why are you so fat?"
That still one of the best movies of that kind of genre. One Crazy Summer, Better Off Dead.
Oh yeah.
Better Off Dead's fantastic.
Here's the story of a man trying to go fast.
And the crowd swells with anticipation.
What was when they're at the dinner table? I made everything French. We have French bread, French fries, French dressing, and Peru.
Right. Ricky.
Kept trying to put his testicles all over me. Is what?
Yeah. What'd you say? Octopus? Tentacles. Tentacles.
Yeah. NT. Such a great movie. We're here with Lane Meyer as he is about to ski down the K2.
I mean, it's such a quotable movie too. I mean, it's an
Oh,
extremely quotable film.
The claymation scene in the middle with Van Halen and the hamburger.
Everybody wants some. Yeah.
Yep.
That
But
was, and Savage Steve Holland was a traditional animator. He actually went on to do, I think it was Eek the Cat, after his live action stuff. He went back to like Saturday morning animation and was still an animator for years afterwards. Apparently, I had read an article where there was so much like control being exhibited over those films as he was trying to direct them that he sort of like wanted to go back to animation after working in Hollywood.
It's probably a lot freer to just to do it yourself, do everything yourself, not have to worry about,
Which reminds me of a story of, like, I love George Lucas stories. Like, whenever I hear a George Lucas story, I'm like, yeah, I can imagine George Lucas saying or doing something like remarkably asinine like that. So, and this is a story that actually came from Ron Howard. So apparently on the set of American Graffiti, even back then, like Ron Howard really wanted to direct. Like, he was even then trying to transition out of being an actor and being more of a director behind the scenes. And I guess as an actor, so he's acting in George Lucas's film, and he goes to Lucas sort of between takes, and he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to sort of, cut my teeth on being a director, and anything that you can tell me, just like lay it out there for me." And I guess Lucas looked at him and said, "Yeah, you know what would be great about being a director? Something I got to tell you. You should actually direct animation." And he was like, "Why?" And he goes, "No actors."
Wow.
And he said that he didn't think that he was like venomous. He was just being extremely honest and not realizing that he was indeed talking to an actor.
Well, yeah. What are you gonna do?
I also
actors.
Another quick George Lucas story is that I knew someone who worked for LucasArts, right? So I worked in some of the video games, and he ended up actually getting tagged to do some of the production artwork for Attack of the Clones. Nice. And he said that so you would do like a ton of artwork, like a ton. Like, Lucas would come in and be like, "Okay, I want something that's like similar to a speeder, so this doesn't get too far off the ground. It's more of a land vehicle, And he'd give him like certain things, and you'd make like 40 drawings, like these great drawings, and so you'd have like 5 artists creating like 40 drawings a piece. And apparently he would come in, and he would just look at them, and not tell you what he liked or disliked about anything. But he would pick like 5 out of 200 and just be like, something more like this. And then he'd leave. And they were all just sitting there like, why? Something more like what? Why? Why did he pick 5 out of 200? And they were all like very different. So it wasn't like he picked them because they were all similar or all the same color or all the same like design. He'd just be like, something more like these. And like every day, everyone just thought they were going to get fired. It's like they lived in perpetual fear that they were not going to have a job because of just how very little feedback he would give them. It was always just like, "No, this is what I like. Okay, yep, like this."
I think I worked for that guy, and like more than once. I think he just, wanders around and takes management positions at several companies.
So before we get into weird tales. Since we're talking about like bad management, just real quick, what is your single worst experience with upper management ever, and why?
Wow, I would say it's actually pretty easy. I was working for a major box home improvement store. Whose I will not name them, but their name rhymes with Shmom Meepo, and their people do wear a wonderful blend of yellow and red. So I had every year we close. Every year we were, kind of tasked with creating this huge Black Friday Christmas display, right? And it was supposed to be, at the time I joined that company, there was only 550 stores in the country. And we were like in the 540s when my store opened. And I spent 3 overnight shifts along with my 3 day shifts on the same 3 days. I would go home for like 4 hours and then come back, building this incredible display. I had 20-foot tall candy canes. I had rooftops with snow on them. I cut out and built a 3-dimensional sleigh out of plywood. Whole thing. The manager that tasked me with doing that walked by, and I, kind of stopped him, like, and he goes, "Yep, that was it. Yep." I go, "No, thank you." He goes, "That blue thing you get on Friday with your name and address on it, that's all the thank you need."
Wow.
It's kind of like, okay.
Wow.
Single worst experience of my entire life.
Yeah.
And I worked for AT&T in their construction division during the monopoly years.
Okay, Sean, give it up. What was your worst single experience working with upper management?
Okay,
there was this time I was making this movie about an alien abduction, and this director was a fucking
he's such a bald dick,
such a pompous ass.
No, like I was working at a video game retail outlet, not the popular one that everyone knows. It's a different one that was attached to a rental movie rental franchise, and I got in as assistant manager. And I was long story short, basically I ended up getting canned because we would get in a bunch of games we'd buy back from people, video games, to get in cheap and turn around and give them credit for it. Well, in order to sell our pass that would get you extra discounts, in order to get those numbers so we beat all the other stores in the district, the manager was like, you need to, like, if we have a real cheap game like under $5, we get a ton of them that we end up throwing away, most of them, because they're not really worth anything to us. Give them away as part of the deal. He would do it all the time. I'm like, sure. I did it. Next thing I know, I get shit canned the next day because they say that I was stealing. I'm like, fair enough. I leave, go try to find another job. The next day, I get a call from the district manager saying, hey, come back. We really need you. It was a mistake on us. I'm like, sure, no problem. They're like, we need you to work open to close for 2 weeks because the manager's having a baby. I'm like, that's why you want me to be back. And they're like, well, and just to let you know, we have this new store opening up and we're thinking about putting you in as a manager position. I'm like, cool. So I come back. I work my butt off open to close for 2 weeks. This guy comes in that's supposed to be a new closer. Like he's like kind of under me on the way of like key holders. So I train him, real nice guy. Everything's going well. He kind of helps out a little bit, but most of the time it's because of a manager. I got to be there the whole time. We're raking in numbers. Best in the entire district. We're doing great. And the manager comes in with his kid. And if you remember back in Living Color, Damon Wayans used to do that part with the baby where he'd stick his face through the bassinets.
Yeah.
You remember that? Okay, that's like pretty much what this was. Like when they pulled open the little carrier, it was like my manager's face. He's like this big, just butt ugly hook nose looking dude, and he was just like, it was like his face is shrunken down, and there's like a baby hands, and he was like,
no.
Meh. And I was like, and they're like, oh, isn't it cute? I'm like, man, that's something. Like that's
right,
such a baby. And so I tried to talk up this baby, right? And then I'm trying to be really nice and get a compliment. It's a baby. We can't help it. The fact that it was born from an ugly parent. And so the next day, he's like, "Well, I'm coming back at the end of the weekend, and I'm gonna, we're gonna talk to the district manager about you getting that job." I'm like, "Yes, it all paid off." Weekend comes, goes. He comes back. Nothing happens. Almost a week goes by. I don't hear anything. District manager comes by and says, "I'm like, hey, so what about that juicy promotion?" He's like, "Yeah, that closer that you trained? That guy got it. Sorry, we don't want you to have the job. And your boss told us that you weren't doing a really good job while he was gone." So I was like, "You asshole." So I went in the next day, and I was supposed to work, and I said, "Here's my keys. I'll come back for my paycheck later." I left.
Because that's all the thank you need.
Yeah, that was it. That's the one I got the most dirty done to me. So
yeah, that's a rough one.
I had so I worked for this creative services company, and I'll say it was one vowel away from being a really cool company. So I did not work for Pixar. I was a vowel away from working for a company that cool. And I think this company now is no longer around. I think it's been entirely absorbed by another company. So the art director, I was one of maybe, I don't know, between 30 and 40 people in the art department there. And the art director was just an enormous, like, self-important ass. This guy, he wore bolo ties a lot. So that should have been like a red flag.
Late 80s, early 90s?
No. This would have been like 2000. In an age where you didn't see a lot of bolo ties.
Okay.
He chose to wear these bolo ties.
He's bringing it back.
Yeah, or just holding on to the remnant of any ghost he could of the bolo tie era. So he would do this thing where you'd have to lay, all your shit out on the table, and he's supposed to sort of come in and AD it and everything and tell you what he likes, what he doesn't. But instead what he does is he looks at it and gives you like the most drawn out sigh. Like just looking at your work is painful to him. So you lay all your stuff out and he's looking at other people's. It was mainly me. He just didn't like me. So, and I'd lay my stuff out and he'd get to everybody's and he comes to me and you'd hear this. Like he's fucking deflating. Like it was the longest sigh. Like you just expected him to start zooming around the room like a fucking balloon. It was the longest sigh you ever heard. And the entire time, like, you're just sitting there like just sinking in your chair for whatever kind of bullshit he was going to tell you. So it got to the point where I didn't even care anymore because I realized that it wasn't the quality of what I was doing right. It was me. This guy did not like me. So there was an assistant art director who could do no wrong. This guy could do no wrong. And he was going to be gone for 2 weeks. And he said, listen, we're going to have 2 meetings. You'll have 2 meetings with the art director. I need you to show my stuff to him because I was point on this project. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. So we get to the meeting, very typical. Everybody's laying their stuff out. Now, I'm not laying my stuff out. I was told not to do anything for this particular thing. I'm there in place of the assistant art director who he loved. And I'm laying out the assistant art director samples. So he does everybody's work. He comes around to what I've laid out. Does his thing. And then looks at one of the particular pieces and says, do you see a problem with this? And I just wanted to see where he was going with it. And I was like, I said, well, I can tell that you see a problem with it because of that long drawn out sigh that you do every time that we meet. And he looks and he goes, the spacing on your text, on your font is, he goes, this is like graphic design 101. And I said, yeah, I was going to tell insert name here the same thing when he gave them to me, because these aren't my samples. And he just stopped dead in his tracks. And he actually had the audacity to say, well, let me take a second look at him then.
Oh, wow.
So it got to a point where I disliked the guy so much that we were at, like, it was a department get together off the clock. And he was outside smoking a cigarette. And he tried to be chummy with me because it was just he and I. And he said something to the effect of, because, I'm really surprised that you've hung on as long as you have here, like knowing that he's been a dick. And I looked at him and I said, I've only hung on because I knew at some point in time you and I would be alone together. And I was hoping to just split your nose across your fucking face. And I walked away. He would never look at my artwork after that. If he was outside and I was outside, he would turn right around and walk in. Only if there were a huge amount of people surrounding us would he even address me. Otherwise, it was eyes on the floor. So the best thing I ever did was being just downright belligerent to him. And then, like, everything was kosher after that. Everything was fantastic. Like, I could basically just go in and not work all day long. Like, if I just wanted to, like, surf the internet, it was fine. Because there was no way he was ever going to come back by my desk. But he was the worst. It was just the most pompous, self-important. Like, this guy, I mean, and in that instant, I realized I'm going nowhere in this job. Like, there's absolutely, and I don't think I stayed on, like, too much longer after that than after, like, I had that confrontation with them. Because I realized that I'm not even going to get a good reference here. Like, regardless of the quality of work that I put in, there was no way that I was going to get a good reference with this guy. But, like, oh, go ahead.
He never looked at your work.
No, he couldn't see past his dislike for me. Like, he was never seeing my work. He was only really seeing me. And he was notorious for being this way. Now, this is New York. Ton of creative agencies in New York, right? Ton. So I went to a creative staffing agency while I worked there just to see what was available because I knew I was going to phase myself out, right? And the staffing agency, when I went in there and gave them my resume and everything, they were like, oh, you work at, insert name here. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, do you work under, and they said his full name. He was such an asshole that, like, the greater part of New York knew how bad this guy was. That was the fifth creative staffing agency that would no longer work with that company in the greater New York area. So I knew that no matter what job I was trying to get, if he ever was looking for a job, he was going to have a hard time finding one because of his reputation. And then the agency got absorbed by another agency. And I would always look, like, on LinkedIn, and it was always him, like, looking for a job for years. So, karma took its time, but when it came around, it struck pretty hard. So I felt a great feeling of satisfaction and fulfillment. Knowing that, that definitely came around. But yeah, let's shift gears now that we've been able to vent a little bit about horrible upper management in the past. And let's take a look at some weird tales tonight, because I've got a few that I want to talk about. And we've only really got about like 25, 35 minutes left anyways. So does anyone want to go first with weird tales? And we want the weirdest of the weird. And by the way, if anybody's listening tonight and they have a weird tale, that's 217-292-1680 is our call-in line. We want the weirdest of the weird, just bizarre stuff. So do you have anything tonight for us, Rob? Do you have any weirdest of the weird tales?
I have the. I guess what I have is a paranormal investigation that I took part in. We were called to this home. Excuse me. And I do not. I never get to the point where I say, well, I'm not going to do this. Not going to go in there. I'm not going to investigate. My clients always come first. But I got to this house and just didn't want to go in. Could not explain why I didn't want to go in. I would get up ahead of steam, get to the door, and just be like, not going in there. Just not going to happen. And eventually I finally did go inside, and it's the one time in over 1,000 cases that I told the people that live there, you know what, you need to move out. And they were already 3/4 of the way packed. They had all their stuff already packed in boxes, and they were gone. They were hoping that we would be able to come in and tell them, now everything's cool and, stick around. But it just, anyway, we go through the investigation, we deal with the whole thing. And for some reason in the middle of it, I just kind of got this weird feeling like I'm going to say that I was myself, but was not myself. And I really wish that, I don't know if any of the members of the group that were there that night could call in and kind of go through this, but I was standing in a doorway and I was just repeatedly pounding my hand on the door jamb. And I just, for some reason, I go, he was standing right here. And I just kept pounding my hand, I'm like, and then he jumped out, and I'm pounding my hand and there was a cross up here and pointed over behind my head. And one of the other investigators that was there was filming me, and they were like, wow, your face does not look like your face. And I was like, I had this, anyway, we go through the whole deal. I had this weird, feeling. Well, we researched the house. No one died in the house. What happened was a boyfriend broke up, or girlfriend broke up with the boyfriend. The boyfriend was literally standing where I was standing, hiding in the dark, waiting for her to come home after the breakup. When she got home, he proceeded to leap out and stab her a whole bunch of times. Sent the kid, the 8-year-old kid, into the bedroom and told him to just stay in there and don't come out. The kid was smart enough to open his window and run and go get help. And then the guy proceeded to stab himself and fall down on the floor. Now, unfortunately, the mom did pass away. The girlfriend did pass away, but it was 3 days later in the hospital. And the guy's, life in prison and all this weird stuff. But what was really strange about it was the feeling I was standing in that spot, and I was doing the, amping myself up for when this was it was the weirdest thing. It was, I don't know, if it's, what you want to call a channeling or a possession by energy or whatever it was, but it was a very strange feeling to have that happen.
Do you think that really intense moments like that, intense rage, passion, even joy, or especially sadness, can leave almost psychic imprints, manifestations on areas?
I do. But I've never had that kind of feeling ever again. I was having dreams for I didn't sleep for more than 15 minutes at a clip for a week after that. I was waking up, I was dreaming, and I'm looking at my hands. I'm seeing blood all over my hands, and the red and blue police lights and everything flashing on the wall. And I sit up and rip open the it was like that vivid, that real. So it was definitely a strange coincidence. And now that I talked about it tonight, I'll have the dream again tonight, because it every time I think about it, every time I talk about it, it kind of like it's weird. It was like such an eruption, like you said, of emotion. It probably just lingered there.
Okay, do you have something, Sean? Strangest of the strange, weirdest of the weird tales for this evening?
I do have one, but it's not about me though. I I did some little research just trying to find something kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
So what I ended up coming up with, and maybe you guys have heard of this, or maybe some people out there watching the podcast have heard of this, but the Dropa Stones. I don't know if that's something you've ever heard of. So these are out in there's a mountain range out at the edge of China near Tibet, and the stones, which are discs, actually have microscopic, almost very, very tiny uh, hieroglyphics that are etched into it. And when this original expedition back in the 20s found this cave out there in the mountains of the Himalayas, and they ended up finding a cave that they saw a bunch of graves in and these stones. And the graves were very, very small. Like each of the people, the individuals, the corpses were like maybe 3 to 4 feet tall. And so they took the stones, they took them to one of the museums in China, researched it. Fast forward to the 60s, and they there's kind of a resurgence of interest in the stones again. They actually even go and see if they can try to send like vibrations, like auditory vibrations to the stones, and they seem to almost respond to it as if like similar to the way vinyl records with needles on the grooves of a vinyl record start to kind of vibrate and give off like small hums or music. And what's weird is they go back out there and they talk to these people that are nearby, these couple of tribes. One of them is called the Dropa, and one of them is called the Han. They end up talking to them, and they basically find out that supposedly, between what the interviews that they had with these tribes and the stones themselves, is that what they deciphered off of the stones is that they supposedly this people that they call themselves the Dropa or the Zopa, DZOPA, come down from the clouds on a craft, had been stranded on our planet in the mountains, and were trying to survive. They're very small people, large heads, large blue eyes, kind of a yellowish or grayish skin, and that they basically eventually got hunted by other tribes that thought that they were strange looking, and eventually the Dropa were wiped out. The people in the 60s started kind of naysaying all this about saying that the graves that they found it was a shrine by the local tribe, and that they told the researcher, the exploratory researcher that went out there in the 60s, they said that it had to have been gorilla corpses, that they were the remnants of gorillas that were native to the area, and the
old gorilla corpse.
Right, yeah. And so then like the researcher goes, gorillas don't bury their young, or they don't bury their deceased. They don't do that. And so this is like an elephant graveyard. These were like ritualistically entombed. And so what was crazy about it was later on they found another culture, another tribe out there that still exists to this day, that exists in the Himalayas, kind of on the edge. They're very xenophobic. They're very isolated. They kind of keep to themselves, but they have, for being of Asian, of Tibetan and Chinese descent, they have bright blue eyes, almost kind of weird mottled light colored gray skin. They range anywhere from the tallest being about 4'2" to the smallest adults being almost less than 3 feet tall, and abnormally large heads and skinny bodies. And there's been lots of course, skeptics, and the skepticism about it is that the Chinese government doesn't have any reports that they've made official to the public that the Dropa exists, that these expeditions happen, that the Dropa Stones even exist in their. They don't have them listed on manifest as the Dropa Stones, even though they were brought back and given to the museums, donated as relics. It's just kind of all this stuff kind of disappears. But the more I looked into it, the more I was just like, this is just really bizarre, and it's crazy that there's these kind of genetic markers that are very out of the ordinary, just very high up. And I even kind of watch some videos about activity in that area, and it's kind of crazy how there's a whole entire giant sector of the Himalayas of Tibet and all that where they have no fly zone. And it's not because the Chinese government doesn't allow it. It's because of the fact that if a plane has to depressurize and drop, it's too close to the top of the mountain range. And anytime that they have it, they will literally go miles around to avoid that area because of how treacherous it is for aircraft. So I don't know, it's pretty strange.
Now, like, are there like, is there photographic evidence from the expedition of the 20s, or?
So there is pictures of, I believe, and I apologize if I butcher the translate or butcher the pronunciation, but called Bai stones, which are discs that, I mean, essentially they look like stone records. They're flat, usually made of jade. What a lot of people don't realize is everything says jade is green, but when jade is exposed to the elements in the air over time, it actually changes into a multi-hued stone. So some of them look almost yellow or white, but there's very tiny concentric rings. And if you see some of the older pictures from like the 60s, it's pretty obvious that there is, I don't know. If you're a believer, if you're a skeptic, I guess it depends what you see. But I mean, I would say it's something very similar to an otherworldly figure that is put on the actual stone itself.
So it's kind of like it could have been like someone else's version of the gold record we sent out into space on you know, with all the cool.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So
that's what I'm gonna have to look into, because I dig stuff like that.
And I can't remember the name of the stones, but there's another group of stones that has been largely debated that depict like human characters alongside dinosaurs. And they think that they might have been placed there. There's evidence to suggest that they might be as old as people think they are. Other people are saying that they're quite obviously forgeries that were placed sort of on this beach where they were found. But we have a lot of instances of, I guess, what you could call like, you know, archaeological record on stuff like stones, discs, etc., that just seem to get conveniently displaced. It seems that if there's not room for them, academia sort of finds a way to get rid of them.
It's the Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse, man.
Yeah.
You know, it just gets and then wheeled down some
people.
Yeah, just gets wheeled down some you know, hallway in some totally forgotten warehouse with some guy named Shep that's, you know, like sweeps the floor all day long.
Yep.
And
And you have to think that I mean, I'm just going to go a little bit further down this rabbit hole. You have to think that there has to be a storage place for artifacts such as that. I'm not saying, the Ark of the Covenant exactly, but just human logic dictates you have stuff. You need places to keep your stuff. There are things that fall outside of what we would commonly put in museums. There are things that are probably at one point were part of private collections, and we don't have any COAs or anything for them anymore. So these things have got to be in warehouses, in storage. And I mean, I know from researching, for example, like lost films. Like I love the idea of lost films. Like for the longest time, we were looking for like 43 Minutes from Metropolis that we actually found. We're still looking for, Cheney's London After Midnight. We still don't have a print of that. But I know that people who research these lost films very commonly will find warehouses that have been sitting there for so long, and they're not rented, they're owned. So a production company, a label, whatever, owns this parking lot, this warehouse, and they've not had reason to go in there for 60 years.
Yeah, they just pay the the facility crew to go cut the lawn, check the roof every once in a while, make sure everything's okay, good, move along.
So we have to have huge repositories.
Well, you got to think about this. Back to when they talk about, Hitler's, wanting to have his extensive museum that he was going to showcase to the world, and just the insane dozens upon dozens of artifacts and paintings and pieces of history that he had ransacked from across Europe and stored away. And I mean, it was extensive.
I just watched a show on the History Channel or Discovery, one of those. This guy was, kind of looking for like the quote unquote Nazis in Argentina or kind of thing. And in 2016 or 17, some 30,000 items from the Third Reich were discovered in this back room warehouse area in Argentina. And one of the things they found, they opened it up, and it was three looking glasses. Okay. And inside was a picture of Hitler reading a map with one of the looking glasses that was in this case. And the guy's like, so I'm holding something that Adolf Hitler held. I'm just going to put this back now. But it was like 30,000 items. Just, they were working on something. I'm like, oh, what's behind this wall? Oh, look, it's a warehouse. And what's in here? And it's like, ungodly, SS relics. And like you said, Ash, it's just, nobody ever looked in there for years. It just sat there.
I had in fact, this was, from my wife and looking at stuff online. We had a couple of movie posters that were for sale that we were interested in, that we decided to inquire about, that was in the area. So it was a very specific film. I mean, for me, it was Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. It was one of the original one sheet movie posters, and it was in great shape, and I wanted it, and they had a pretty decent price on it. So we got a hold of them, and there's another story there, so I'll condense the story, however. And the idea is that they didn't just have a couple movie posters. This guy had cleaned out like someone's father's house and said, hey, if you like movie posters, why don't you come over and I'll show you what we got out of this house. So he had a full 2-car garage, and the entire garage was stacked up to your knees with one sheet movie posters that they pulled from one house. And there was stuff there that, quite frankly, I did not think I was going to see. Some of the stuff that I got was pretty crazy. Like, I ended up picking that Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D up. An original Dead Zone, an original Cujo, all one sheet, and they hadn't even been trimmed down. So they were in the marquees. They weren't even put in frames. And one of actually a movie I never thought that I would ever own is has anyone ever seen Midnight Madness? With like David Naughton in it, where it's a scavenger hunt.
No,
I don't think I have.
Okay, if you ever get an opportunity, you need to see this. It's ridiculously goofy, but it's these teams who have been assembled in a scavenger hunt to try to, make it through the scavenger hunt. And, at one point, like this team has this sort of oafish, this big oafish guy on it. And they've got like a ball and a picture of something, and they're trying to construct a sentence out of it, which is their next clue. And the guy looks at all of it, and he's sitting there, and of course, his sort of oafish voice is like, "Fagga beefy. Fagga beefy. Oh, fagga beefy." And he just laughs for like 5 minutes. It's absolutely stupid lowbrow. But I'd seen it here and there. And I'm like, this movie's ridiculous. I loved it when I was a kid. And there was a Midnight Madness, I think it's Midnight Madness, movie poster, which I never thought that I would see. But one thing that they did, it's a 1980 film. So Midnight Madness from 1980. College students participate in an all-night scavenger hunt. 5 teams receive clues to solve, leading them to the next clue site. Just find it, however you get it. It's probably like free on YouTube or something at this point.
They probably give it away at the supermarket.
Exactly. Midnight Madness. So I got a Midnight Madness poster. I also got an original Altered States poster. A lot of stuff that you don't really find like out in the wild. And we're looking through this, and I'm like, I think that's a Revenge of the Jedi poster. So, for people who don't know, before Return of the Jedi was Return of the Jedi, it was Revenge of the Jedi. That was their working title. And some movie theaters, in anticipation of Return of the Jedi, received Revenge of the Jedi posters. So this guy had a Revenge of the in the stacks. In the stacks. And we're talking old Disney Song of the South posters.
That Revenge of the Jedi poster could buy you a Lamborghini now.
Yeah.
The amount of stuff that was in this garage. And it got to the point that we were spending so long going through it that he just started giving us posters. Because he was like, I'll give you this one for $10 or this one for $5. He's like, it's going to be easier for me to give you guys these posters for next to nothing because we have so many, we'll never be able to list them. But
is he still around?
I would suspect he would almost have to be.
Okay.
This was maybe like 2 years ago.
I would like you to check and see if he has a Fish That Saved Pittsburgh poster.
Okay. I think I still have his information. I could probably reach out to him.
Just because it was like the worst movie ever, but I saw it as a kid and loved it for some ungodly reason.
Oh, I mean, there were like tons of exploitation posters. I got original one-sided Last Starfighter. I mean, I got some great stuff. Great stuff. But it was just the idea that the entire garage, it was stacks, like up to your knees of one-sheet posters from early 70s through late 80s.
It's
John Hughes stuff, all the John Hughes stuff. Breakfast Club, everything. Just sitting there.
And that's one of those things that, like, whoever's house he cleaned out, the guy was probably affiliated with some movie theater somewhere. And
yeah. The one that really broke my heart was severely water damaged, and it was an original one sheet for Halloween.
Oh wow!
That I would have loved to have had, but it was severely water damaged. And the friend that I came with me even bought that one. He was like, "I'll take it. I'll take this one too." Yeah, it was like 2 days of us just sorting through the stuff to find what we wanted. And even then, the stuff that I got, there were doubles. The guy just had it in just an immeasurable amount. And that's one of those things, like, this is in the Midwest, in a relatively small town, in a house. So, yeah, I mean, to further sort of reinforce the point, there has got to be items out there like those, Dropa?
The Dropa Stones?
Stones that are part of private collections. Because we know at one point in time, there was a ton of Egyptian antiquities that came out of Egypt.
Yeah.
That the aristocracy, remember, we used to have unwrapping parties.
Mm-hmm.
If you were rich enough, you would buy and unwrap a mummy for a party.
Yeah.
Which to me is mind-blowing. Like, talk about weirdest of the weird. Like, is there a more is there a worse example of rich entitlement than the fact that at one point in time people were buying corpses?
Grave robbing and calling it archaeology.
Like, let's not even call the mummies mummies. We're just going to call them for what they are. They were buying corpses and removing the ceremonial wrappings at parties. There are stories of, at the end of these parties, because what do you do with a desiccated corpse?
You throw it out.
You throw it out.
Yeah.
They don't even know how many were literally put out in the garbage after unwrapping parties. That to me is mind-blowing. Like, absolutely mind-blowing.
It's the decadence of that, I think we joked about it once before, the America, well, this building's been around for 300 years. There's front doors on houses in, parts of Egypt that have been around for, 600 years, just the door part,
Mm-hmm.
We have no concept of, and what do we care? They're just, who are they? They're just, it's a dead society. We don't care anything about them. So what? They were, kings. King of what?
Right. Like, in my mind, I can see these rich assholes sitting there talking to each other and being like, well, they're not even new money anyways. They're no money. No money. And then I said to her, if you're going to pull that, you're not coming to a single one of my parties. We should buy a mummy. That's just how I think that conversation went.
They didn't even have Rolexes.
Right.
I mean, come on. How did they tell time?
It's like, and Mary's never, ever going to get married. And it's certainly not going to be to any upper crust Bostonian that they think is going to be, we should buy a mummy.
I kind of picture, it's that the whole.
Right. It's like, they just, we should buy a mummy. Tell your husband to buy us a mummy. And then they just buy mummies.
It's that scene from Scrooged where Karen Allen it's in the future and she's all made up in the restaurant and like the kids are banging on the window.
Yes.
Like, scrape them off, Claire.
Right. And then they bought a mummy.
Right.
That's the next thing they did.
There's 300 children outside the gate, that would kill for a cracker. And you know what?
And they're people sitting around going, I'm sick of wood. I'm sick of wood on the fire. I'm done with it. Hand me that Dead Sea Scroll. I want to see what color it burns. Burn the Dead Sea Scroll. And then they just watch the fucking thing burn.
Because they have 3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it is. Well, you know, I could go on all night about rich assholes. But again, we have reached the end of the hour. I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. We are going to start trying to have some of these shows lined up in advance so that people can know in the space of a month or 2 months exactly what they can be looking forward to on Night Terrors Radio. Everyone have themselves a lovely evening. We'll be back here next Thursday, and hopefully we will be able to tell you what guests we have on next Thursday. Thanks, everyone, so much.